Good morning, everybody. This is Martin John, and I am here to talk about the Tao Te Ching. So the Tao Te Ching, if you're not familiar yet by now, is an ancient text written about 600 BC. And that means it was written around the same time that a lot of people believe that scholars believe the Old Testament was written. And it's all filled with all sorts of enigmatic wisdom. And what I have been realizing is that I like a riddle. And I think I talked about this yesterday, is that the way the Tao Te Ching is expressed, the way it was written, is kind of like a riddle. You don't read it to get an answer. You read it to ponder. You read it to figure out what it's saying to you at this moment. Because at different times, you're going to want to think about it in different ways. When it says something like, in governing, let me pull up a Tao that uses that phrase, governing. In governing, she doesn't need to control. And in Tao does not governing in any capacity, when led by Tao, doesn't use force to gain power. So we're talking about governing. Now, you can address that to governing a state, governing a classroom, governing your body, governing your thoughts, governing your choices. You see, that's the riddle that we're going to look at, right, when we address the Tao. So the one that I'm looking at is number 30, Tao Does Not Dominate. And this is still in the first part of the Tao Te Ching. So the Tao Te Ching is separated into two parts. There's the Tao Ching and the Te Ching. And the Tao Ching is really a personal thing. It's not solely, it doesn't have to be solely about you and your relationship with Tao. But it is where the Te Ching, everything after 37, so 38 on, is more or less looking at the group, and the Tao Ching, the first 37 verses, are looking at you and your relationship with Tao. And what it says here in 30, Tao does not dominate, is that governing in any capacity when led by Tao doesn't use force to gain power. Yesterday we talked to JK about her daughter, and she can't use her identity as her mother to gain power over her daughter. Because if she were to use that, she would, water on stone. It would, it's not going to do anything. Right. I mean, water will eventually erode something, but you don't want to erode your relationship with your daughter so she isn't there. Right. That's not what you want to do. But governing in any capacity when led by Tao doesn't use force to gain power. And then it goes into why that's the case. Every force applied with it will suffer an equal counterforce. Now, take into consideration a couple things that we already talked about. One, this is part of the Tao Ching, which is the first part of the Tao Te Ching, and is therefore, about your relationship, your personal relationship with Tao. Now, you don't have to look at it this way. For whatever reason, I'm looking at it that way today. Governing in any capacity when led by Tao doesn't use force to gain power. Every force applied will suffer an equal counterforce. How many of you have tried to meditate, forcing yourself to meditate, and it just doesn't work? And it's like the thoughts keep coming, and the judgment. And that's why I always say judgment stagnates energy, because judgment is trying to use force to gain power. So violence, and violence could be judgment, however it is intended, will always rebound upon oneself. So if you judge, it's going to rebound upon oneself, meaning that you are now focused on judgment. You're going to go out in the world. You're going to see judgment. You're going to feel as if others are judging you. And that's violent, right? That's where you're going to, bump up against your triggers. That's where all sorts of stuff is going to go awry. I'm going to read that whole section again. We're not even done reading this whole thing yet, but I'm just going into it just because we started talking about governing and how the Tao is more like a riddle and less like an answer. Governing in any capacity when led by Tao doesn't use force to gain power. And then it talks about why. Every force applied will suffer equal counterforce. So violence, however it is intended, will always rebound upon oneself. So we can look at every force applied, every time we try and force ourselves into doing something. And we do that when we're under the influence oftentimes, and when we're under the influence of our parents, right? Our parents they raise us in a environment that's reward and punishment. And when they raise us in that environment of reward and punishment, well, we want to be rewarded, so we will suppress those parts of ourselves that will possibly get punished. We don't like those parts of ourselves that get us punished, right? These are why we're under the influence of our parents. And it's not a bad thing, right? These are things that our parents didn't do anything bad by us being under the influence of them. Once we get to a sovereign state, right? When we're teenagers and we're rebelling, and maybe we have a job so we can move out, or, you can't, it's probably not advisable to hitch yourself to people who want you to be different, right? So you don't want to hitch your wagon to a horse that is going to only take you where it wants to go. You know what I mean? So if you're 17, 18, and you despise your parents, but better go get a job. You know what I mean? That's not forcing anything. That's like, no, I need to make up my own mind about where I want to be. And so the only way to do that is to figure out how you're going to exist in the world. And to all the parents out there who are trying to get their children ready to go out in the world, that's not a little task, especially the way the world is set up today, because many people who are 18, 19, 20, 21 have no idea what to do in the world. And that's why you don't want to use force to gain power over others. Because governing is parenting, like you're in one sense. Once again, this is a riddle. So What is governing to you at this moment? Is it about your diet? Is it about your children? Is it about your education? Is it about your relationship? What are you governing? And then, and it's written this way. And that's what really turned me on to the Tao so many years ago. It's just like, oh, this could fit so many things. What is governing? And then it says governing in any capacity. So when I was writing this, I wanted to put that out there. I wanted you to be able to dictate what capacity you're governing. What are you governing? Are you governing a job? Are you governing a child? Are you governing a relationship, a household, a budget? In any capacity, when led by Tao, does not use force to gain power. So are there places where you're using force to make it easy on you? You are trying to force people to do what you want when you want? And it says, when led by Tao, doesn't use force to gain power. And the next line is, every force applied will suffer an equal counterforce. So you don't use force in any way. You don't try and manipulate. You don't try and reward or punish. You don't try and get the answer you want towards what you're governing. So even if you're governing a budget, and you're like, oh, I don't have enough money. Oh, well, maybe you do have enough money, but, it doesn't match what you thought. So what are you going to do about that? Like, instead of using force, how are you going to adjust where you're at and what it is you're governing? Because the budget's the budget. It's an individual unto itself. And it's a part of Tao too. So violence, however it is intended, and violence is telling the budget it's not enough. That's judgment. You're judging that budget. You're judging your child. You're judging by saying anything. Oh, you didn't do good enough. Well, you didn't do as well as you'd hoped. Right? Like if you're talking to your child and your child fails at something, I was like, well, is that what you wanted to do? No. Oh, okay. Well, let me help you do what you want to do. What is it that you want to do? Do you want to pass the test? Do you like that you failed the test? Do you want to work harder at the thing? Rather than shaming them, I'm not saying that everybody or anybody is doing that. I'm just saying that there are different parenting strategies, because it's just like, well, if somebody shamed me, I would do that. And it's, well, but that doesn't mean that everyone should be shamed. And that's another reason I tend toward the Tao Te Ching, because it doesn't have an approach. It just says, every force applied will suffer an equal counterforce. So violence, however it is intended, will always rebound upon oneself. And those statements of like, no good deed goes unpunished, right? Where does that coming from? Every force, the force being a good deed, because maybe you're trying to, it's like, oh, I want this person to like me. I want something out of this. And then so I'm going to do a good deed because I have an outcome I'm aspiring for. That's force. Otherwise, the statement wouldn't exist, right? Every good deed goes unpunished, or every good deed, I forget what the stat is. No good deed goes unpunished. That's what it is. No good deed goes unpunished. Connecting the good deed to the punishment. The reason that statement exists is because the good deed was looking for an outcome, and the outcome not matching the expectation, that is the punishment, right? Every force applied will suffer equal counterforce. So violence, or good deeds, however it is intended, will always rebound upon oneself. Now, if you do the good deed without thinking about the outcome, you're not going, then no matter what happens after the good deed, you're not going to attach it to the good deed. And in anything that, like, the only reason that there's a punishment is because there's an expectation. And oftentimes when we apply violence, we don't expect to get violence back. It's all manipulation. Manipulation is violence, and judgment is violence. Expectations of others is violence against them. Even if you want the best, even if your intentions are great, right? That your intention is outcome focused. The next line is, where armies march, briers grow, and in their wake follows hunger and villainy. Now again, this is metaphor. Where armies march is where violence is. You know, where you're setting up your armies, that's where violence. And the image that this line conjures up for me is like, you know, all these footsteps trampling the soil and making it so the grass isn't going to grow and it's not going to be fruitful. And the only thing that's going to be left is a briar, prickly patch of like vines and stickers, whatever, you know, and that's what happens when you are governing something with judgment. So where armies march, let's think about yourself and your childhood or your parenting or whatever. If you are judged over and over, and all you're thinking about is not being in trouble or like getting rewarded or being something for someone else, what's happening is you're getting your personality squashed for a personality someone else probably wants but wasn't able to achieve themselves, which is why they're looking at you to achieve it for them. And because they're doing that, they're using force, because you're not doing something I want to have done when I was younger. And so that's the armies marching. I'm squashing your dreams for ones that I've already squashed in myself. And you're not easy to raise, so I'm going to make you easier to raise by rewarding and punishing in a different way. And even the free roaming parenting is, you know, where it's like, we're just going to let our child do what they want. Children do need boundaries. and saying that they don't is a rule. It's a way of forcing something. So I'm not saying that there's no way of raising children or governing your diet or your budget or whatever it is you're governing. But you have to allow it to be what it is. And that's, you gain power through space. You gain power over, like, you can inspire people to be who they are. Like, that's what I hope to do, right? I guess I govern this show, right? And I'm not trying to use force, right? Like an advertiser uses force, right? They tell you about something over and over and over again. And when they tell you about it, they tell you about all the things that it's going to give you. I don't know if I've ever told you what Tao is going to give you other than yourself. You know, like, and so what you put in, you get out, and there isn't a thing that you're going to gain, because it's only about losing. It's about losing the influence. And the more influence you lose, and you've been influenced by being governed through force. In many cases, I mean, in a consumer society, it's forceful, right? You're mandated to make money. You're mandated to spend money. You're mandated to act a certain way. You're mandated to engage in certain things. And the only way out of that is by your own mind freeing to all that you are. And you could, if you get, I couldn't, because it's too much for me, live in Manhattan, in New York City, and still not be guided by the senses. That's possible. I couldn't do it. I can't be in Manhattan for, a couple days without spending big chunks of time just in whatever room that I'm occupying, like being quiet as I can be, because it's all too much. New York City, Manhattan specifically, uses force by governing their people, right? Like, just the energy of the city itself is not being led by Tao, right? Because there's so much force. And I remember one time I was in New York and someone was trying to make a turn, and the light was cycling, and they were in the turn lane, and they're blocking, and then someone on the corner yelled at him, like, "You're not going to go anywhere. What are you doing?" And then the driver was like, "It was my turn, so I went." And even though that's going to block other people, he took his, right? Because he knows other people are going to take theirs. And that is governing through force. It's like you have forced people, you've forced their hand. Now, that's not a person governing. That is all of the people governing. And injecting their ideas, injecting their fears into the energy of the space. And they're all trying to use force to gain power. And so that turns the whole city into an entity that is governing. Once again, where armies march, briers grow. And briers are desolate places, this like thorny, woody, and you wouldn't want to walk through there. It's not welcoming. And in their wake, in the wake of the armies marching and the briars growing, in the wake of that. And again, this is metaphor. Follows hunger and villainy. What kind of hunger? Like this harkens back to the riddle. Hunger and villainy are just words that can, like, if you're looking at something that you're governing through force, or if you're looking at something as how you have been governed through force, where's the hunger? Is the hunger for other people to approve you? Is the hunger for other people to tell you how valuable you are? Is the hunger for a relationship in which you're chosen amongst all of the people? Someone chose you. Is that because you were forced to prove yourself? Governing, again, when we look at this as a riddle, when we look at this as broadly as we possibly can, and then bring it home to us in this moment, right? Governing in any capacity when led by Tao doesn't use force to gain power. And then where armies march, briers grow, and in their wake follows hunger and villainy. There's so many places to just explore. And so, yes, if you come up and pick a number, I'm going to read the whole thing. But when we're done reading it, I'm going to ask, what stood out? What lines stood out? What words stood out? Because attaching that subtle experience of, like what actually stood out was the briers. The briers stood out. Okay, well, let's talk about that. And that's the approach that I'll take. I'm like, okay, because when you hear this read all the way through, it's confusing. And it's confusing kind of on purpose because it has to be broad. That doesn't mean that any number would fit for your situation. It doesn't mean that everything says the same thing and it says nothing, right? So, but any one that you do read, you will have a lot of leeway to think about things a little differently. That's why we talk about this as living a more reasonable life. So how can we broaden the way we're thinking about this? So after the hunger and villainy line, we move on to the next section where it tells you how the master deals with things. Skillful in what she does, the master achieves her goal and stops, neither forcing nor manipulating further. She knows that dominating goes counter to Tao, and whoever opposes Tao will certainly die early. So, there's a lot here. And it's still in riddle. It's still using these words like die early, neither forcing nor manipulating further, achieves her goals. What is her goal? Right? Skillful in what she does, the master achieves her goal and stops. So let's look at budgeting, it's a deal with money rather than children. I've never had a child. I have had money. Julie's going to join me. Maybe we can get off. Maybe you're going to save me from this. I don't know. Hey, Julie, how are you?
Veer off in the Julie direction. She's had loads. You can have one of hers, Martin John. It's fine. They're all kind of grown up now, so you ain't got too much work to do.
That's good.
Anyway, we're designing. We've decided, me and Brad, we're having a conversation over here while we're listening to you as well. And Brad said, what would be the most boring job in the world? And he's come up with pen design.
Pen design?
Pen design. A designer of pens.
Really?
Yeah.
I would think the most boring job would probably be stationary engineer. So a stationary engineer is kind of someone who deals with the mechanical things of a building. So you go in the building, and it's boring because 360 days out of the year, there is nothing to do. And then when something goes wrong, you have to do something for an hour or two.
Yeah, and usually pretty efficiently as well.
Yeah, because that's got to get dealt with. So I think the nice thing about stationary engineers is they can design pens in their spare time.
yeah, good work. I like it. Right, I picked the number. I have this book in my hand. It is got a lovely kind of textile cover. It's kind of really soft. This book. It's really
nice. I really like the cover of it.
Yeah, so do I.
So nice.
Anyway, it's called the Tao Te Ching, and it's a New English version by Martin John. I don't know if you've heard him, but I'd like to read this version for me today. Number 32, please, Martin John.
32? Oh. That's right up my alley.
You've got the same name as this guy who wrote this book.
That's you. I'm telling you.
Yeah, number 32.
And I've been, because I'm prepping for this workshop I'm going to be doing on the 2nd. I've been really kind of looking at this because I realized how much I really love the riddle, and I'm like that's what I really love about the Tao is that there's so many definitions you can attach to a word and stuff, and sometimes the double negatives that I put into things, so it's not what it and all of that. And this one is entitled "It's Not What You Can See."
Can I read it, Martin?
Oh, please do.
So subtle is Tao, it has never been seen, and yet nothing can be seen without it. When beings can remain centered in Tao, all that they perceive is in harmony. As that harmony inspires actions, those actions will have names. Know that those names are provisional. If those actions inspire institutions to form, know where they reach should end. Inspired actions, although they may have names, those names needn't be taken too seriously. Tao is behind it all, even if you cannot see it.
This is so beautiful.
It is, isn't it? My friend.
So I wanna point something out, and this is no criticism or anything, but it is interesting. You didn't read one word in that.
Okay. That's interesting.
It was the word is in the second line. So and it's interesting because it does change. And I just want to go over the two different meanings. So subtle So subtle is Tao, it has never been seen, and yet nothing that can be seen without it. So what I heard was that you can't see anything without Tao. And although that's true, what this is saying is nothing that can be seen is without
Tao. Yeah.
Right. So if you can see it, it's Tao. From dirt to walls to paintings to stars to your neighbor, it all has Tao in it. And then it continues, when beings can remain centered in Tao, all that they perceive is in harmony. Why? Because all that you perceive, whether you're seeing it with your eyes or your skin or your nose, or it's not... What's that?
Or your feelings.
Right. Or your thoughts.
Yeah, I do a lot of feelings, interactions with feelings, and that can be dirt. It can be the apples on the table in front of me. It could be the cup of tea. It could be talking to Martin John, but all of it is a feel for me. That's my perception, my perceiving.
And that's where we can go back to the riddle idea, where it's like, well, when we use the word seen in the first line, so subtle is Tao, it has never been seen, we don't want to close our mind off to only our vision. It's just saying Tao has never been seen. It has been perceived, it has been felt, it has been around you. And so, since Tao has never been seen, we don't want to close our mind off to only seeing for the rest. And that's where the riddle comes in. Because, a riddle takes you down gives you red herrings, takes you down a wrong path, gets you, what's right and white and red or white and black and white and red all over. What's that?
A newspaper.
Right. But you couldn't figure that out because it's taking you down the wrong path. That's what's happening here. So subtle is Tao, it has never been seen. It's not saying anything else. It has been felt, it has been perceived. And
it's
yet
like
nothing
wind.
What's that?
I think about wind when I think about Tao.
Yeah.
We've never seen wind.
But you've seen the effects of it.
Correct, yeah. Interesting.
And then that next line, when beings can remain centered in Tao, all that they perceive is in harmony. They still can't see Tao. They still, everything they see still has Tao embedded in it. And when they remain centered in Tao, all that they perceive, their feelings, their smells, their sight, it's in harmony. As that harmony inspires actions. And that's the thing. When you can, when you surrender, like after you don't have a job and then you're like for a little bit and you're like, okay, I'm just going to stop looking for a job because it's so frustrating and everything, and you decide to take a bath and you're in the bath and you're just surrendering to it. And then inspiration happens, right? And then it's like, and then I'm going to do a thing, right? And then I'm going to run through the streets naked, like, because I figured out how to measure the crown. Do you know about that story?
No, that's very interesting. I'll have to look that one up.
So there is, I don't know who did it. Brad probably knows. Somebody was trying, so a king set a smith to task to make a crown with X number of so much gold.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And he gave him the money to do that. And then he's sitting, and for some reason he's like, what if he mixed that gold with another metal? And I don't, it's like, how would I know if how can you test it? And he, went to his people, whatever, and somebody that, science guy or whatever. And he's racking his brain trying to figure it out. And then he surrenders to it all. And then he says, I can't figure this out. And he gets in the tub and he figures out that you displace water, right? When you get in the tub, the water rises. And if you put so much gold in, it's going to rise. And if there is a different weight to a different metal, it's going to actually be less or more water displaced. And he figured that out by getting in the tub, because he was surrendered. I mean, yes, there is displacement of water in the tub, but I think the point is made that he's stopped using force, like we were talking about in number 30. And then he's in harmony with Tao. Why? Because he's not forcing anything, because he's open to receive. As that harmony inspires actions, those actions will have names. So he's now acquired a name of genius, let's say.
I'm streaker.
What's that? Streaker. Know that those names are provisional, and if those actions inspire institutions to form, and that institution could just be the institution of you. The institute, like, I am no longer this person who struggles to think about stuff. I am a genius. But know where that institution should end. Because you are going to have to learn more. And the only reason you were able to surrender to receive that information, it was by not having an identity that you were a genius.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't you.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, that kind of says that, you can title yourself genius for figuring out, what you figured out in the bath, but doesn't genius cover so many different subjects that you might need to know about?
Right. And once you attach a label to yourself, and that's what we talk about in the Tao when we talk about the names. Names are labels. Names are identities. Yeah. And that gets in the way.
You lose yourself in them.
Right.
Did I tell you about my friend who rang me up just for a conversation? I don't know if I've told you this story before.
Was I the friend? No.
No. You are the friend.
But, you might not have had to tell me the story. I mean, I might have been there.
You might have been. This friend rang me up. He's a friend who I knew from working in a hospital. I looked after his parents, and gave him a lot of kindness. And we just got on like a house on fire. And one day he rang me up, and I've been doing this hypnotherapy CBT study. Mm-hmm. And he rang me up, and I decided that I was a hypnotherapist and, working with CBT. And I started trying to help him find solutions. And this is what he said to me. It's a great example of that identity. This is what he said. He said, "Hello, who am I speaking to? Is Julie there? That's who I want to talk to, Julie." I was like, wow, there you go. That is a good friend. Yeah. Showing me not to lose myself in an identity that I am working towards gaining, but never lose Julie, because Julie is the root.
That's
Julie
right.
is the being.
That's the harmony.
Everything else doesn't matter.
And that's this line. If those actions inspire institutions to form, it did inspire an institution inside of you.
Yes.
And then you were dealing with that in an institutional way. That conversation.
Yes.
And then it says here, know where their reach should end. It's fine that you're studying. It's fine that you know this, but you don't have to inject it into every conversation you're having.
Correct. Yeah. My friend wanted me, his friend.
Right. Yeah. And you just, good. And then it says, the next line, inspired action, although they may have names, those names needn't be taken too seriously. You know? And we take those names and those labels so seriously. You know, I can't tell you how many times I talk to people about Tao and they are offended that I'm telling them the things that Tao is saying. It's just like, oh, well, but what I do is so important. Mm-hmm. And it's telling people what you do is not important.
Yeah.
It's hard for people to hear, man.
It is. I said to a friend of mine yesterday, another friend, not you, Martin John. I do talk to you a lot about other things. I said to a friend yesterday, you are not your doings. You are not your actions. You are you doing those actions.
Yeah.
So don't gain your value from perpetuating this thing where you will be doing it with integrity, doing it the best job you can, doing your job and more than your job in an allotted time, so much so that you are tired and resentful because you've done that. You know, we are not our actions. Our actions are inspired by us. And we're behind all of those things, you know.
Yeah.
So I was telling her that, and she said, "That's amazing." I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I've got some guy in my he teaches me to think about things very differently." And you know, he's been studying the Tao for a long time now, so it's kind of nice to share a conversation with him, and it's also really nice to kind of have these conversations with others.
Yeah. And and that's the thing when you do, like, there's this, earlier I was reading Tao Does Not Dominate, number 30, and that idea that you don't use force. You know, like I hope I never use force to get someone to pay attention to Tao.
Yeah, just a little offering every now and then. You know, it's an offering. It's an invitation.
Well, it's only, I'm just putting it out in the world because I love it.
Yeah.
And I'm not offering you anything, but if you receive something from it, good on you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's, for me personally, I've received a lot from it. Yeah. And, you know, it's for me, it's kind of received as gifts. Really, in a way, you know, it's kind of really helped me out. So why am I not going to share those things?
I know, and every time, and every time we share it, we just get more. And that's the thing that Tao is always saying. And I cannot point to the more I get. I cannot point to a pile of stuff.
No,
I cannot point. I can't point to what I've received from doing this, but I know I received from doing it. You know, and it's cumulative. So one day to the next, there's not going to be much change, but at the end of the year. At the end of, I mean, we've been doing this on, Wisdom and now Noonbot for 3 years.
Yeah.
And my understanding of Tao, I think, and my ability to, I wrote my own Tao in that time. I published that, and I'm doing workshops on it now, and all of these things. My understanding of it is much more broad. And I don't want to say like it's it's tricky because I don't want to just say, oh, I understand it more than you. I'm open to it.
You're collaborative with it, which allows you to learn alongside. You're collaborative with it. And that's kind of rare, actually.
Yeah. And it's, and, you know, and this 32 of yours, as it continues, is inspired action. Although they may have names, just like, oh, I published it out. I do I have all these things. Those names needn't be taken too seriously. And that's why I'm always saying it's stupid. The Tao is stupid. Now, if you're aligned with it and it helps you, even though it's stupid, you love it.
Yeah.
You know.
But also it can make me quite miserable at times too.
Yeah. Because you can't escape yourself.
That's right, yeah.
And escaping yourself is what we all love to do, because like that's the path to feeling secure, when there's really no feeling of security, because that can be taken from you any moment.
That's right. Yeah, it's the feeling of security is something that we all search for in various ways.
Right.
But actually, security, along my path has become a thing that's within myself.
Yeah.
It goes everywhere with me. Even when I'm panicking about having, these dogs that ate chocolate and had to go to the vets and all of these other things all of the time. But there's some kind of security in what will be, will be.
Right. And that's what this is really talking about. It's not what you can see, because what you can see is showing you that you're not secure in one place or another, or showing you that you are secure. Either way, that's not what it is. That's not what life is. That's not what you're surrounded by. You're surrounded by you, and Tao is behind
change as well. That's the other thing. You're surrounded, and it's within you. Change, continual change, all of the time. You're
right. And as we get older, we don't like change because learning is taxing. It makes us feel uncomfortable. And when we were learning as little people, as kids and whatnot, like it was overwhelming, and it made us uncomfortable, and it made us so uncomfortable that we attached to the reward and punishment, that we attached because that was security. We attached to doing what we were told. And we built these frames of reverence that ultimately turned out to be trauma. And now as adults, we have to reverse that and realize that harmony is the thing that's always happening, is the thing that we're always striving for. It's not to be secure, but to be harmonious, and to realize that everything around us is harmonious as well, and not that doesn't mean that there are not wars happening. This doesn't mean that there are not oppressions happening. Those things are happening, and there are people that are dealing with this. And if I am inspired to invest in that, whether I'm on either side, then good. Do what you do and move on. It isn't yours anyway, and that's what this. It's not what you can see. Tao is behind it all, even if you cannot see it. That's the last line of this piece. Tao is behind it all. There is a harmonizing taking place, even if you can't see it. The inspiration, and the more you can trust your inspiration and yourself, the more harmony will be. Will come from you and will propagate in your life.
Yeah. It's a huge one, that one, isn't it? Yeah, I enjoyed that. Thank you so much for having me on and
No, always. Yeah. Thanks for
allowing
coming
me
up.
for reading it and being also noticing little bits, because that was really interesting.
Yeah. And it was interesting for me to contemplate the fact that that little word changed the way I do like from what it was written to remove is changed the definition of it, changed what it was saying. It doesn't make it worse or better or whatever. It's just
What Julie read.
interesting. Yeah, it's what Julie read, and in my mind, you know, nothing can. You can't see what it said was nothing can be seen without Tao, because all you're seeing, if you're not attached to Tao, is yourself. So you can't see that thing. You're only seeing a reflection of yourself, and then you're only acting to everyone else. You aren't open to seeing anything. You know, and that was a different meaning than what's saying, but it's still true.
Yeah. There's something there for me today, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I love you, dear.
So
Thank you for so much. Yeah.
Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and read this 32 again. And for each of you, I want you to just think about the riddle, right? Think about what allows you to ebb and flow in the text, and think about the things that stand out to you in the text, whether what a word or a phrase, and just swim in it a little bit. So this is 32. It is not what you can see. And, you know, like, just in that, it is not what you can see. What is the it? Is it Tao? Oh, okay. Or is it the relationship that you're in? It is not what you can see. Is it the flower that you're looking at? Is it the struggle at your job? Is it the relationship or whatever? The fact that it doesn't reference what it is makes it part of the riddle. It is not what you can see. And as we go, like in the latter stages of this form, what we end up seeing is that it's the institutions to form. It's the identities. It's you are not what you can see. You are so much more than that. You know, Julie is not what you can see. You can see Julie as a hypnotherapist and all of that, but Julie is so much more than that. Julie is not what you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. So subtle is Tao, it has never been seen. Yet nothing that can be seen is without it. When beings can remain centered in Tao, all that they perceive is in harmony. As that harmony inspires actions, those actions will have names. Know that those names are provisional. If those actions inspire institutions to form, know where their reach should end. Inspired actions, although they may have names, those names needn't be taken too seriously. Tao is behind it all, even if you cannot see it. We're all being inspired. Are we open to receiving that inspiration? And if we're open to receiving that inspiration, how readily are we able to give up the rest of ourselves to that one moment of inspiration? Does that make sense? Do you understand, like, when we're inspired and something happens so easily, and then we decide to commodify or to identify ourselves as that thing. And then many of us could have done that at an early age because, we were praised for something. Let's go chase that praise. Know where their reach should end. Know where the identity should end. Know where the institution of you, the commodification of you, I'm valuable to the world because I'm a nice person, or I'm a profitable person, or I'm an important person, or I'm a famous person, or all of that. Know where their reach should end. Don't take those names or identities too seriously. Tao is behind it all, and just follow this path, and it's going to get better. Every day. It's going to accumulate in your life, and it's going to fill you with light and love, and you are going to put that out in the world tenfold. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to just remind you guys, I have a workshop coming up around the Tao. I'm kind of working on little things with you guys in the mornings, just thinking through things. But it'll by the time I get the workshop perfect, it's going to be good. We're going to pull all of this stuff together. So if you're interested, check out my profile and the links there. If you're interested in doing an hour Tao reading, like an oracle reading with me, I do that through Satnam Yoga Chicago as well. You can schedule one of those in my I have links to that in my link tree. If you just want to message me, I can send you that link directly. So coming on here, having a 15-30 minute conversation about Tao, that is that's free, just because you're doing it for, it's out here. But supporting me and having a journey together is something that that's special. And if you are interested in working with me, you can check out my links on my website or on my link tree and ask questions. I'm always open to working with individuals, and and with my Tao workshop coming up, I feel like I should let you know that. I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Martin John, and until next time, keep recovering yourself.